snake. And it just so happens that Anne's favorite hero is Li Ji, or Li Ji Jianxi, the Chinese serpent slayer, because she is a badass. She saves a village from the serpent who is devouring maidens, but offering herself and then slaying the serpent with her sword skills. Oh, Anne, we gotta talk about this. Anyway, her story tonight is called One Eye, Two Eyes, and Three Eyes. Take it away.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's lovely to be here. Tonight, the story I have for you is not from Asia. It is from Germany, and it comes from a very famous book. It goes like this. Once upon a time, there was a mother who had three daughters. The oldest daughter had just one eye right in the middle of her forehead. They called her One Eye. The second daughter had three eyes, two like you and me, and a third eye in the middle of her forehead. The third daughter had two eyes like you and me. Now the mother loved One Eye and Three Eyes very much because they were so different, so unique. But Two Eyes, she was ordinary. So the mother made her do all the work. She had to do the cooking and the cleaning and the laundry, and they never gave her enough to eat, and she was always hungry. Now, every day, Two Eyes had an additional job. She had to take the goats to the pasture to eat grass. And one day, Two Eyes was at the pasture and she was so lonely and hungry, she sat on a rock and started to cry. Like magic, there was an old woman standing there. She said, Two Eyes, why are you crying? And Two Eyes said, I'm so lonely and I'm so hungry. The old woman said, well, I can't help your loneliness, but I can help your hunger. Watch this. And she led over a black billy goat and she said, bleat, billy goat, bleat, and bring me something good to eat. And like magic, there was a little table filled with delicious foods of every kind. And Two Eyes had a big lunch. And then the old woman said, bleat, billy goat, I pray, and take the covered table away. And the table disappeared. And the old woman said, Two Eyes, you may have this goat for your very own. Two Eyes was so happy. She knew she would never be hungry again. And so from that day, she would take the goats up to the pasture every day and have a big lunch. But after a while, the mother began to notice Two Eyes was not as thin as she used to be, and she wondered where Two Eyes was getting extra food. So one night the mother said, One Eye, tomorrow you'll go with Two Eyes to the pasture, watch her all day and see where she's getting this food. So the next day, One Eye and Two Eyes went to the pasture. Nothing happened all morning, but at noontime, Two Eyes was feeling hungry, so she sang a little song, and it went like this. One Eye, are you waking? One Eye, are you sleeping? One Eye, are you waking? One Eye, are you sleeping? And when she finished singing, One Eye's eye was closed and fast asleep. And Two Eyes said, bleat, billy goat, bleat, and bring me something good to eat. She ate a big lunch. And then she said, bleat, billy goat, I pray, and take the covered table away, and the table disappeared. That night the mother asked One Eye what she had seen. One Eye said, I didn't see anything, but I did fall asleep during the middle of the day. The mother was angry. She said, Three Eyes, tomorrow you'll go with Two Eyes to the pasture, and you'll watch her all day. So the next day, Three Eyes and Two Eyes went to the pasture. Nothing happened all morning, but at noontime, Two Eyes was feeling hungry, so she sang her song. But this time, she made a mistake. She sang, Three Eyes, are you waking? Two Eyes, are you sleeping? Three Eyes, are you waking? Two Eyes, are you sleeping? And when she finished singing, only two of those three eyes were closed and fast asleep. That third eye stayed open. It saw everything. It saw Two Eyes say, bleat, billy goat, bleat, and bring me something good to eat. It saw Two Eyes eat a big lunch. It saw Two Eyes say, bleat, billy goat, I pray, and take the covered table away. And that night, Three Eyes told her mother everything she had seen. The mother was angry. She found that black billy goat and she killed it. When Two Eyes found out, she was so upset she ran to the pasture, sat on the rock, and started to cry. Like magic, the old woman was standing there. She said, Two Eyes, why are you crying? And Two Eyes said, my mother has killed the black billy goat, and now I shall be hungry. The old woman said, Two Eyes, go home. Find the black goat's body, cut it open, take out the entrails, and bury them in the backyard. So Two Eyes did. She went home. She found the black goat's body. She cut it open. She took out the entrails, and she buried them in the backyard. And that day, the next morning, Two Eyes looked out the window, and there, growing in the very same spot, was a huge, shining, shimmering silver tree with golden apples on every branch. Now the mother and One Eye and Three Eyes were standing under the tree admiring it, and a prince came riding by on a horse. He said, who owns this wonderful tree? And the mother said, I do. It's my tree. The prince said, well, can you pick me an apple? If you pick me an apple, I'll give you a wish. Of course, said the mother, and she walked over and reached up, but when she did, the tree pulled back its branches. She could not reach an apple. The mother said, One Eye, come over here and pick an apple for the prince. One Eye walked over and reached up, but again, the tree pulled back its branches. She couldn't get an apple. The mother said, Three Eyes, come over here and pick an apple for the prince. Three Eyes walked over. She reached as high as she could, but you know what happened. The tree pulled back its branches. It would not let her have an apple. The prince said, this is very odd if this is your tree. Is there no one here who can pick me an apple? And the mother said, no, there is no one. But just then, Two Eyes came walking out of the house. She said, I'll pick you an apple. She walked over to the tree and reached up, and when she did, the tree leaned over, and it laid a golden apple right in the palm of her hand. And she gave it to the prince. Thank you, he said. What is your wish? She said, I just want you to take me away from here. So he did. He put Two Eyes on his horse and rode with her back to the castle. Now the mother was not too upset because she still had the silver tree with the golden apples, or so she thought. The next morning, when Two Eyes woke up at the castle, she looked out the window, and there, growing in the middle of the castle courtyard, was the shining, shimmering silver tree with golden apples on every branch. Now, you might think that's the end of the story, but it's not. Many, many years later, Two Eyes heard a knocking at the castle gate. She went out and she opened up the gate, and standing there were two old, old women. They were dressed in rags and begging for food, and Two Eyes recognized them because one of them had one eye and one of them had three eyes. So Two Eyes invited them into the castle to live with her. She took care of them for the rest of their days, and that is the end of the story.
Oh, beautiful. So beautiful, Anne.
Thank you.
Bowen, you're muted. So sorry.
Myself. Okay. Oh, that was so wonderful, Anne. And may the tree always give you golden apples. Quite fabulous. And do you have any announcements that you'd like to make about what's upcoming for you?
Nothing on Zoom, but please come and visit my website at anshimujima.com.
Okay, excellent. We'll put it in the chat for everyone. And thank you so much, Anne. Our next teller is the wonderful Renu Navarin. She's telling on behalf of the Mixed Bag Storytellers at Belmont Village. And her favorite hero from myth is the goddess Durga. It's her favorite deity, as the goddess Durga is symbolic of the inner feminine divine, the infinite inner strength that is present in every woman. And so, to tell the story of how Goddess Durga Devi slayed Mahesura, a demon king, here is Renu Navrin.
Thank you, Bowen. Very good evening to everybody. It's morning here in India, so good morning too. So let me just jump into my story. Thousands and thousands of years ago, the universe was split into three. The underworld, where the Asuras lived. Asuras were the demons. And Bhuloka, which was earth, where the humans lived. And Devaloka, where the gods lived. But above all of that were the three gods. Brahma, who was the creator, Vishnu, the protector, and Shiva, the destroyer. But all these gods also had a supreme being, who was goddess Durga Devi. Now, in those days, Asuras would pray to the gods for boons. They wanted to be blessed with something special. And there was an Asura called Mahishasura. He ruled Patala, or the underworld, but he wanted more power. He wanted to rule Devaloka. He wanted to take over Bhuloka, that was the earth. He wanted to take over earth and the heavens. So he went to severe penance. He prayed to Lord Brahma because you see, Brahma is the creator and he wanted immortality. So he prayed and prayed. He went to severe penance for thousands of years. And finally, Brahma was pleased and he came in front of him and said, yes, what is it you want, Mahishasura? Mahishasura looked at him and said, I want to be blessed with immortality. Brahma looked at him and shook his head. I'm sorry, I cannot grant you that boon. Whoever is born has to die. Ask for anything else. Mahishasura thought for a while and said, okay, then no god, no animal should be able to kill me. Okay, tatastu, he said. Now Mahishasura had not added woman because he was not scared of any woman. How can a woman kill me? And now Brahma has granted me almost immortality. What does he know, he thought. As soon as he got the boon, he took over Bhuloka. He started terrorizing the people. People prayed to the gods, help us, gods, help us. He went over to the Devaloka, or to the heavens, and there he started beating, killing the Devas, and took over the throne of Indra, who was the supreme god of the Devas. Indra turned to the gods and he said, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, do something. This man is creating problems for all of us. Look at the earth. People are suffering. What shall we do? And so they called Durga Devi. Durga appeared, resplendent in a red sari. Her face was so peaceful. Her eyes were glittering. Please, goddess, please, Devi, please, can you kill Mahishasura? Of course, she said. And getting on to her lion, she went down to earth, which was where Mahishasura was. Mahishasura saw her coming and said, a woman wants to slay me? Never, never will it happen. And the battle began. Mahishasura had a boon by a previous penance. He could change form as many times as he wanted. His actual form was half buffalo and half human. The top part was the buffalo and the bottom part was human. He started fighting with full vim and vigor. Durga Devi did not let him go. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5, 6, 7, 8. Every time she brought down the trident to kill him, he would change his form and confuse her. But on the 9th day, she pushed him down and he turned into his own form and drove the trident through his chest. And he was gone. Everybody rejoiced. The humans on earth, the gods in the heaven, and the Trinity, Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva were eternally grateful. Thank you, goddess, they said. Goddess Durga is actually the consort of Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva is considered the destroyer. And even he is ruled by Goddess Durga Devi. Durga Devi is actually the power within all of us. And every story that you hear from Indian stories, especially about the gods and the goddesses, is nothing about the eternal struggle within us human beings, the struggle between evil and good. And finally, good triumphs if you allow your thoughts to go with the good thoughts. The moment you allow negativity to come inside, that is the evil taking over you. That is symbolic of the asuras or the demons. And the goddess is the goodness in all of us, the connection of our soul with the eternal soul, eternal consciousness. So this is why these stories are so popular in India, because we tell these stories to people to understand that internal conflict is there within all of us. And once we win over that, once we decide that we want to be good and help others, that is the purpose of our life on earth. And that is when these stories are shared. And the 9 days when goddess fought with Mahishasura, those 9 days are celebrated as a festival in India called Navaratri. Navaratri means 9 nights. The 9 nights she fought with Mahishasura is celebrated as a huge festival both in North India as well as in the South. So that was the story. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Renu. So I can understand now why Devi is your favorite. She was
You can see her.
lots of inspiration. So Renu, would you like to give any announcements about upcoming events for you?
Yes, I have. Actually, I'm very busy. I think I visit every swap available. Yesterday, there was a swap with the Australian storytellers where I shared a story. The theme was Light in the Dark, which is this year's World Storytelling Days theme. And I shared a story. And then this evening, there is a meeting with the Feast, that is Federation of Asian Storytellers. I'm sure you're aware of that. And then there's on Sunday, there is another storytelling with the Australian storytellers where I'll be sharing a story. And I also, I organize a storytelling festival for children, which is coming up in August. So that is,
Wonderful.
thank you.
Thank you so much, Renu. Amazing. Oh, well, great. Our next storyteller coming up is Almena Mozon. And she is a member of the Black Storytellers of San Diego and also the Storytellers of San Diego. And her very special fairy tale is The Fairy Frog. Almina?
Thank you. And I'll add that growing up, my favorite superhero was Superman all the way. And as an adult, it's the Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. So this is a Swazi fairy tale, The Fairy Frog. Tombe Inde was the most beautiful girl in her father's kingdom. Her eyes were brown like the doe, and her feet, when she danced, they were as swift as the gazelle. Her parents were very proud of her, and they expected that one day she would be a great queen. Now, she had some sisters, but these sisters were quite a little bit jealous of her. They were not so tall or as beautiful as Tombe Inde. In fact, Tombe Inde's name meant tall maiden. And at one point, the jealousy grew so intense among these sisters that they decided they had to get rid of Tombe Inde or they would never have a chance to win a husband for themselves. So they hatched a plot. Come with us, Tombe Inde. Let's go to the red ochre pit and pick some red earth to bring back to the kraal because we are almost out. The four sisters set out and walked for many miles. They sang, they talked, they laughed all the way. They got to the pit, and once they got there, each girl took turns jumping down into a deep pit and using their pickaxe, they would get out some earth, and then the sisters would help them up. Finally, it was Tombe Inde's turn, and when she jumped into the ochre pit, the red ochre pit, um, the sisters didn't help her up, and instead they started shoveling earth back on top of her until she was completely covered. And they ran home, leaving Tombe Inde in the pit. When they got home, their father asked them, "Where is Tombe Inde?" And they said, "Oh, father, the most horrible thing happened. When Tombe Inde jumped into the pit, the earth came down on top of her and covered her. We couldn't get her out." Now, there was something suspicious about the stories that the sisters told, and when the father questioned each one, the story was a little bit different. And so he decided that something was amiss. He put his daughters into a separate hut to think about what they had done and until he could discover what in the world had happened to Tombe Inde. Meanwhile, back at the pit, Tombe Inde was not dead. She was still alive because there were some openings in the dirt through which she could breathe. And she was calling out to people, "I am Tombe Inde. I am not dead. I am alive like one of you." And she just kept chanting over and over, "I am Tombe Inde. I am not dead. I am alive like one of you." And she continued through for hours, just chanting and hoping someone would come and save her. It was getting toward the end of the day, and Tombe Inde was beginning to feel like no one is ever going to come to my rescue. When suddenly she heard a croaking above her, somewhere up above on the banks of the deep hole where she had been buried. And so she called out even louder, "I am Tombe Inde. I am not dead. I am alive like one of you." And there was a big fairy frog on the edge of the pit. And he called down, "Princess, is that you? What's wrong?" And she said, "My sisters hated me. They buried me here in the pit, and I have not been able to get out." "Don't worry, princess, I can help you." So the frog jumped down into the pit and he dug ferociously until he could get Tumbe Linde out. And then he opened up his big, big mouth and scooped her up and swallowed her and then jumped out of the pit. Now, his idea was that he was going to jump along undetected by anyone else. And he was going to avoid any of the crawls because people thought that frogs were bad luck, and he didn't want to have any bad luck along the way or have anyone to come and kill him as he was going along with the princess. So he would call out, "I'm carrying the princess Tombe Inde. I'm carrying the princess Tombe Inde." He didn't want any birds to come and pluck him up. He didn't want anyone to come out and harm him. So all through the night and into the next morning, he hopped along. He didn't go back to Tombe Inde's kraal because he feared that the sisters would be there and would somehow harm Tombe Inde again. So he jumped along until the next morning, and he opened up his great big mouth and Tombe Inde stepped out. And she was hungry, so he did a big and out came porridge for Tombe Inde to eat. Tombe Inde ate and took a nap because she was very tired after traveling through the night. Once again, when it was time to continue on their trip, she got back into the frog's mouth and off they went. They determined that it was best to go to Tombe Inde's grandmother's house where she would be safe and welcome. When they got to the grandmother's house or to her kraal, the frog, rather than going right up to the door because he was afraid they would not believe that he had Tombe Inde, he stood back a bit and called out, I'm carrying the Princess Tombe Inde. I'm carrying the Princess Tombe Inde. The grandmother ran out of the house and said, Who is it? Who is it that knows something about my precious Tombe Inde? And the frog said, It is I. I have information about Tombe Inde. Bring some mats and spread them out before me, some clean, nice mats, and you will see I have some information about Tombe Inde. So the women of the kraal all went and got the cleanest mats that they had, spread them out in front of the fairy frog, and out after he gave a big out stepped Tombe Inde. They almost fainted with surprise, but then they were filled with joy because Tombe Inde was alive. They couldn't believe it that Tombe Inde was alive. Oh, thank you, kind frog. What can we do for you? There must be something that we can do to thank you. The frog said, All I want is just to have a feast spread before me. They gathered all of the fine food, spread it out in a feast before the frog, and the frog sat right beside Tombe Inde and feasted. That night, everyone went to bed, and meanwhile, the grandmother had sent word to Tombe Inde's father, and the father was sending his favorite son to come and get Tombe Inde. Now, when they awoke the next morning, Tombe Inde looked everywhere for the frog, but she couldn't find him. She wanted to be able to thank him and give him a fond farewell, but he was nowhere to be found. Once Tombe Inde's brother arrived at the kraal, they did set out to go back to her father's village. Now, during that year, there had not been much rain, so all of the earth was dry. It was very, very hot, but they sat out on the as they walked along though it just things just kept getting hotter and hotter and more uncomfortable. They were so thirsty, feeling as though they might just perish. But suddenly they looked ahead of them on the pathway where they were traveling, and they saw a giant ahead of them. And they went up to him and they said, Oh, please, we need water. Can you help us? Now, I want to backtrack a little bit because during the time that the frog was hopping along from crawl to get to the grandmother's house, there had been an ogre in the land who had gone to the red pit, and he wanted to get Tombi Inde, but when he got there, she was already gone. So he had been going to and fro all over looking for Tombi Inde. Now, back on the path, the children, the princess and the prince, were actually walking along, and they were getting thirstier and hotter, and they saw this man on the path, and he was giant, and they thought maybe he can help us. They asked him, "Help us with some water. Do you have any water?" And he said, "Well, I might be able to provide you with some water, but what will you give me in return?" And the brother said, "Anything from my father's land, anything you want, we will give you for water." And he said, "Well, then I will have the princess." The brother had spoken without thinking, and he thought, "Well, what do we do now if we can't, if we give Tombi Inde to the giant, then we don't know if he would treat her well. But if we don't do it and we don't get any water, surely we're going to perish out here in all this heat." So he thought, well, the best thing is to say, "We will go with the giant." The giant took them over to the base of a big baobab tree, hit the root with his spear, and out gushed as water just a big fountain of water. And the prince and the princess just jumped right in, and they were drinking, and they were letting the water fall on their faces and just bathing in the water and just enjoying getting rid of their thirst. Tombiende looked up at the giant and realized that he had turned into a terrible looking ogre. He had long teeth that were so long and pointy that he couldn't even close his mouth. His hair was red and spiky, and he had a long curling tail. She screamed, and the brother looked up, and he was terrified. He thought, there is no way that we can fight this giant ogre. When suddenly, out from the fountain jumped the frog. Save me, frog. You are the wisest and the best. You can do something to save us. Please save us. So the frog jumped right up to the ogre, and the ogre laughed. What can you do, frog? And the frog just let him laugh a while, and then suddenly he opened his great big mouth and swallowed the ogre whole. He jumped back into the water and stayed there until the ogre was completely drowned. Then he jumped back out to the pathway. And the princess said, please, ogre, come back with us to our father's kraal. We want to thank you properly this time. You must not leave us again. Come with us. They traveled back to the father's kraal. Meanwhile, the father had prepared a great feast. He had his guards standing at the front of the kraal waiting for them to return, and he welcomed them with open arms. He let the daughters go because he knew that they had not been successful in killing their sister. As they were coming in, though, the father said, well, why are you coming back with this ugly frog? Let's kill him. And Tombi Inde said, no, no, don't kill him. He has saved my life twice. He is a good frog. And suddenly the frog became a prince. He was adorned in otter skins and feathers, and he was the most beautiful prince they had ever seen. And he said, while I was out in the woods, this ogre had come along and bewitched me, and she turned me into a frog. But now that I have true love from a princess, I'm free, now that the ogre is gone. And he said, if you will give me your daughter in marriage, I will give you from my kingdom all the animals that you can even imagine, and riches beyond your imagination. Of course, Tombi Inde's father agreed, and the prince and the princess were married. And as for those sisters, Tombi Inde forgave them, and she went off to live with her prince, never even thinking about the sisters, only enjoying her life in her new home. And that's the story of the fairy frog.
Thank you so much, Almina. And here we have an announcement for the Black Storytellers of San Diego's Women's History Month celebration. And the link is in the chat. Thank you so much, Dr. Almina.
And I'd also like to add that the Storytellers of San Diego will be having the festival, the Storytelling Festival, an all-day festival at the library in Coronado this Saturday, starting at 10 a.m.
Thank you so much. And so after that wonderful story, we have Rose Owens, who is going to be participating as part of the Do Tell Story Swap. Rose adores the fairy godmother in Sleeping Ugly by Jane Yolen because she is an unconventional fairy godmother, just as Rose is unconventional too, and I'm sure a fairy godmother to some. So here's Rose with her story, Thistle Honey.
Mal El-Mokhtar, who is an author, had a friend who gave her a basket of honey, little tiny jars of honey, and there were 28 of them. And she took those 28 jars of honey, and in February, every day she wrote something about a jar of honey as she sampled it. And it became a book called The Honey Month. And every month, sometimes it was a poem, sometimes it was a story, sometimes it was just thoughts, every month. And on day 7, she wrote a story called Thistle Honey. And with her permission, I would like to share that story with you. The day that I met Scraggle was a windy day in the hills. I went around the corner, and there, sitting on a black rock, was a tiny girl. She looked like she was about 7 years old. She smiled at me. "Hello, Summer Girl," she said. "You look like Summer." And I smiled. And I looked at her. She looked like Summer, too. She had a round cheeks. She had a wide smile and a button nose and blue eyes and curly brown hair. Curly is maybe a little bit kind to say it because it looked like a twig tangled mess. But I smiled at her and I said, "You look like Summer, too." And she did. She was wearing a purple tank top and tatty jeans, and I was wearing a yellow blouse and a blue cardigan sweater. And I said, "You look cold." And I took the sweater off my back, and as I held it out to her, she looked sad and frightened, and she took the sweater and she bounced off the rock, and she was gone. And I walked around the rock and looked, and she wasn't there. She was here and gone. As I walked home, I thought I couldn't have hallucinated her. I was shivering, and my sweater was gone. And when I got into the house, there sitting on my bed was Scraggle. And she looked at me and she said, "You may give me honey, but only thistle honey, the finest that you got. And the juice from apples, and maybe a little bit of fresh milk, and a loaf of bread, and nothing else." She said, "Don't you understand the terms of the compact?" Compact? I don't remember a contract. I don't remember promising anything. She said, "I need honey." Well, I have clover honey, but no thistle honey. "Oh, you horrible, horrible girl. You have snatched me and taken me away from my home. And now you're not even keeping the terms of the compact." She said, "You took me, and now my mother will miss me. And she will have to go and snatch some ugly farmer's brat. And it will trample on my sweet peas and smash my asters. And all because you wanted a Thisky for yourself." She said, and I said, but I didn't. I didn't. She said, "You gave me a new skin, and now I have to serve you for the rest of my life." Skin? She must mean the sweater. And I said to her, but it wasn't a gift." "Oh, you stupid, stupid girl. I was there. You gave me the sweater, and it was freely given. And now I have to serve you." "Oh, the sweater. But it wasn't freely given. It wasn't a gift. You see, you said I looked like Summer, and I liked that compliment. It felt so wonderful that in thanks, I gave you the sweater. It was a trade, a swap." She looked at me, and she bounced off that rock, bounced out my door. She said, "I will talk about terms of the compact. when you have honey. Well, I didn't go walking in the fields for the next 2 weeks. I mean, what would I say if I ran into her again? And one day I was at a market, and there was one of those little boutiques, the kind that have scented soap and perfumed candles and little jars of jam with fabric around the top tied with a bow and honey. A very, very expensive jar of thistle honey. I looked at it. I guess I could get by with tea and jam for a couple of extra days. And I bought that thistle honey and I took it home, screwed the lid. It was pale yellow, like liquid gold. It smelled like clover honey, but with just a hint of apple. Definitely apple. Definitely green apple. Screwed the lid back on. It was raining outside, but I couldn't wait. I put on my wellies and a rubber raincoat and went running out into the fields. Scraggle! Scraggle! What is it, Summer Girl? What is it? Look, I have this jar of honey, thistle honey. Would you trade this jar of thistle honey for that sweater? She was still wearing it. It was soaking wet, but she was still wearing it. She reached out. She took the jar of honey. Mm, I wanted to say, could you be my friend? Could we talk about our families? Could we run down the path together? Could we chase butterflies? But I didn't dare. I mean, who knows what rule there might be? And so I watched, and she screwed the lid back on, and the pocket, the honey vanished in her pocket, and she took the sweater and she threw it at me. And she said, "Well, what are you waiting for? Come on. How can you have an adventure standing in the rain?" Yeah, couldn't. How could you have an adventure standing in the rain? And I reached out and I took her hand and we ran off the path together. And that is the story of Thistle Honey.
Wonderful, Rose. How fabulous. I must always remember to look for thistle honey.
It's very expensive.
Oh,
You might
thank-
end up with Scraggle too.
well, it sounds like that would be an adventure. Thank you so much, Rose.
Okay.
Our next teller coming up is Claire Hennessy from 6 Feet Apart. And Claire says, oh, I would love to do this in her accent, but unfortunately, I would fail miserably. So Claire says, my fave hero is King Arthur, one of the lessons I paid attention to in school. Camelot and Sir Lancelot were also romantic, and of course, all the Monty Python skits. So just imagine Claire saying that. Claire's braided story is not quite right. Welcome to SAC, Claire.
Thank you, Baron. Thanks, everybody. So once upon a time, there was an adventurous little girl with golden ringlets, and her name was Goldilocks. And she loved going exploring in the woods behind her house. And then one day she went a bit further than she'd ever gone before and came to a clearing. And in the clearing was this sweet little log cabin. The door was open and it looked very inviting and cozy. So she walked up to it. She couldn't see anyone or hear anyone. So she opened the door and she stepped inside. She found herself in this lovely, bright yellow kitchen with blue kitchen cupboard doors. And there's a big round wooden table in the centre with steaming bowls of porridge. She went closer and the smell was just tantalizing. Her mouth watered and she remembered she hadn't had breakfast that morning. She went up to the first bowl and tasted it. Oh, God, it was much too hot. She went up to the middle-sized one. Oh, but that was a bit sweet. As she was trying the smallest bowl, she suddenly remembered she absolutely hated porridge. Ugh. So she went over to the cupboards and rummaged around, and at the back of one, luckily, she found a giant box of Cocoa Pops, her absolute favourite. So she quickly poured herself a big bowl and gobbled it up because it was just right. I followed my boyfriend Mark through the back door into his kitchen. I had just got off an 10 or 11-hour flight from England to San Francisco, followed by another hour's drive to his house. I felt a bit spacey and lightheaded from lack of sleep, and my eyes were all gritty. Mark was chattering away non-stop next to me, and it had been that for the entire journey, and I must admit I had stopped listening a while ago. He flung his arms wide as we opened the door and he said, "And this is my kitchen." It was big and airy with a large centre island leading onto a dining area with a big wooden table and 6 chairs. "Yes, it's what's made me buy the house," he said. "I love cooking." Now, Mark had been my high school sweetheart, and then we split up and hadn't seen each other for over 30 years. I discovered him on a British school reunion website about a couple of years before this and found he'd moved to live in California. We'd been reconnected and having this long distance, very romantic relationship. And then he'd flown over to meet me in England a few times. And now I had flown over to see where he lived with the objective that we might get married. And if so, I would move myself and my 2 kids over to California. I have to admit, it was a rather daunting prospect. And I was really hoping that I'd like his house and want to move over and live there. Now, although the kitchen was nice and big, it was lacking any colour or any feminine touches. The walls were like this grubby white, and there was one picture on the wall. It was nowhere near as my cosy, pretty blue kitchen back in England, where I'd often spend ages with a cup of tea or a bottle of wine with my friends chatting. This kitchen seemed a bit cold and, I don't know, just not quite right. Now, after eating all those cocoa puffs, Goldilocks thought she'd have a quick rest and before making the long trek home. So she wandered into the sitting room. It was so cozy and warm. There was a log fire burning gently in the fireplace. There were 3 very comfortable looking armchairs in varying sizes in a semicircle around the fire on a pretty colourful rug. Goldilocks clambered onto the biggest chair, which she had to admit was really too large and very uncomfortable. She tried the middle-sized chair because the cushions were so pretty, but it was squishy and horrid when she got there. So then, of course, she went to the smallest chair. It was much more her size. It was the perfect level of comfort and softness, and she just thought, yes, that's right. So she covered herself with a pretty, brightly striped coloured blanket that was hanging off the back of the chair and snuggled down. There was a storybook on the arm of the chair, and she picked it up and started reading. "Oh," she thought, sighing with pleasure, "this is just right." We walked further into the kitchen, and I saw that adjoining it was this big open plan sitting room on the left, and there were 2 massive sofas facing each other in some sort of browny, greeny, sludgy colour. And there were a couple of bookshelves, no pictures, no curtains, nothing pretty. Mark suddenly glanced at his watch and then said, "Oh, I'm really sorry, Claire. I've got to go. I've got a work meeting. Can you do the rest of the tour by yourself?" And then he buggered off. I looked into the garden, which I could access through the patio doors, but it wasn't like my garden back in England. I mean, where was the grass? Where were the flowers? There was this large expanse of brown, dead, I suppose, grass, and then a giant concrete patio. As I looked around me, everything felt really strange and foreign and, I don't know, just not quite right. Goldilocks finished the story about the princess and then, she rubbed her eyes and decided to check out the bedroom. Maybe she'd have a bit of a lie down. Again, there were 3 beds in different sizes. She went on to the biggest bed, but obviously that was way too big and uncomfortable. So she jumped over to the middle-sized bed. It was so squishy she almost got stuck in it. She dragged herself out, and by now she really should have realised this. She was a little bit slow on the update, that the littlest bed was going to be the perfect one for her. And it was. She snuggled down, pulled up blankets, and then her eyes drooped as she fell asleep because the bed was just right. I walked back into the house to check out the bedrooms. Now, the house only had 3, but Mark had said he was thinking of converting the office into a 4th bedroom, when and if we moved over. And we were going to need it because 2 of his 3 children still lived at home. And of course, I had my 2 kids. My stomach lurched at this. I mean, if we moved over. The office was just pretty empty with just some desks, a computer, and a printer. It was rather uninviting. The first bedroom belonged to Mark's 18-year-old son, and it was small, scruffy, big double bed, couple of guitars leaning against the wall. The next bedroom was painted a dark purple, like an eggplant had exploded onto the walls. It looks like it knocked everything out as well because there was mess everywhere. The large desk had makeup and nail polish, hairbrushes all over it, and the bed was unmade and shoes and clothes littered the floor. I mean, could my neat and tidy OCD daughter share a room with Mark's teenage daughter? The small family bathroom had been painted this dark, aggressive red, and it felt a bit like I was walking into a giant's uterus. I sighed. I walked down the hallway into Mark's master bedroom. By now, I knew what to expect. It was boring. They were drab. There was no pictures, no curtains, just the metal blinds on the windows. The queen bed stood in the middle of the room as if it had been abandoned. And the adjoining shower room was tiny and cold. I walked a bit despondently back to the kitchen and sat on a chair. I put my head in my hands. Nothing about this house felt right at all. While Goldilocks was sleeping, the owners of the cabin returned. There were 3 huge hairy bears. "Somebody's been eating my porridge," said the biggest bear. "Mine too," said the middle-sized bear. "Mum," said the smallest bear, "you didn't tell me we had Cocoa Puffs. I love Cocoa Puffs. Can I have those for breakfast instead of porridge?" Mummy Bear looked a little bit embarrassed, but before she was able to answer, the Daddy Bear went into the sitting room and started roaring, "Somebody's been sitting in my chair." "My cushions have got messed up," said Mummy Bear. "Somebody finished my storybook," said Baby Bear, who looked just about ready to cry. They found Goldilocks curled up on the smallest bed. She was fast asleep and looked so peaceful. They looked at each other, and because they were really very nice bears, they decided to leave her sleeping because she looked just right. What on earth am I doing? I looked around me at this drab, dreary house and shook my head. What had I been thinking? I mean, what? I sent an email to an old boyfriend halfway around the world and then thought we would just be like a prince and princess in a fairy tale, fall in love and live happily ever after in a gorgeous castle. Well, I know we had fallen in love, but this house certainly was not like a beautiful castle in any storybook I'd read. I mean, could I ever imagine myself living there? And in this heat too. Sweat was running down my face and my clothes were sticking to me. And what about my family in England? We were really close. Could I really drag my 2 kids away from the bosom of their family, the only grandchildren? I mean, what sort of monster was I? And not to mention, Mark's daughter was not overjoyed at the thought of having an evil stepmother telling her what to do. I looked up as the back door opened and Mark walked into the kitchen. A huge smile spread across his face as he saw me. "Oh, I do love you, my Claire," he exclaimed. "It's so exciting having you here in my home. I know it's a bit dull compared to your house in England, but we can paint it any colour you want and get more furniture, whatever you want. I mean, I've waited 30 years for you, and I just want to make you happy." He came over, gave me a huge hug, and then kissed me. And in that moment, I realised that the house didn't matter at all because he was just right. Thank you.
Fantastic, Claire. Thank you so much for that wonderful story.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, just right. Claire, tell us, what have you got?
Well, we've got loads and loads and loads of things, and I won't bore you with telling everything what it is. But I'm going to put the 6 Feet Apart website in the chat. So if you go to sfapshows.com, you'll see all the shows and things will be coming up. Obviously, the most important of which is the Bay Area Storytelling Festival, which has Andy Offer Irwin, Motoko, and Jasmine. God, I can't. Jasmine Cardenas, all as featured tellers. And then we've got the SAC showcase, of which Bowen, you're going to be one of our tellers. So lovely. So we've got really fantastic stuff going on, and you can find all about it. And it's still on our website. You just click the BASF logo, but I'll put the direct link to it in the chat. Tickets are now available, and the early bird pricing ends at the end of March. So go and check that out.
Yes, and thank you, Claire, as well, for being our tech person tonight. Oh my goodness
But I'm
sake.
going to get double pay.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Claire. Our next teller is going to be the fabulous Sarah Armstrong, and she's representing SAC tonight. And Sarah loves Grandmother Spider in the Anansi stories because she is the quiet, unassuming small creature who gets things done. And Sarah is going to tell us the story, The Twig Collector and His Wife. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Bowen. Thank you so much. Once there was a fisherman who lived in a village of other fishermen. That's how they made their living. Now, he had grown up there, he had married, he and his wife lived there. They had 3 wonderful sons. And that fisherman taught all 3 boys about the water, how to find the fish, how to beware of the currents, how to find your way in a storm, about the rocks in the harbor, how to avoid them. He taught them everything he knew. And the boys loved fishing, as did all the people in the village. But one night, a storm came up that was so ferocious, it turned people around. They didn't know where to go to safe land, and all 3 of those boys were lost. Well, in their grief and their sorrow, the old couple moved to a cottage on a cliff overlooking the sea and changed what they did for a living. The old woman took care of the house, swept everything, kept it clean, cooked, managed their small garden and the chickens that they had with them as well. The old man would go into the forest nearby and collect twigs and branches to sell in the marketplace for firewood. Well, one day he was coming around that big rock that separated the forest from the path to his home, and there in front of him was a stranger, a tall man in a long white robe with a long white beard. And he smiled at the old man and held out a sack towards him. The old man took the sack and looked inside. It was full of gold coins, and he fainted right there on the path. Well, when he woke up, the stranger was gone, but the sack of gold was still there, so he picked it up and started for home, thinking about how comfortable life would be with him and his wife with this wonderful treasure. But before he got there, he thought, if I fainted, she will surely faint. It will surprise her so much. Perhaps I'll save the gold to the morning when both of us are fresh and I can share our bounty with her. So he buried that sack of gold coins underneath the manure that was at the back of their shed. And he went inside and had supper, and they went to sleep. In the morning, he was having the most wonderful dream of good food, sausages and biscuits, and just delightful. But he opened his eyes, and all of those smells were coming from his house. So he went in. Old woman, how is it that you've made this wonderful feast for us? Well, old man, you didn't bring anything home last night, so I had to do what I could, and I was able to sell that manure behind the shed to the farmer down the road who's planting a new field. He buried his face so she wouldn't see the expression on it and ate his breakfast and went into the woods to gather more twigs and branches, thinking about what had happened. And at the end of the day, he came around that rock, and there was the stranger, shaking his head and smiling, but holding out a sack that was larger than the one he'd gotten the day before. Well, the old man took it and looked inside, and it had twice the gold the sack from the day before had, and he fainted again right there on the path. But when he woke up, the stranger was gone, the sack of gold was still there, and he started to carry it home, thinking again how beautiful the life would be that he and his wife would have from then on. But again, he thought, if I fainted and there's even more gold, she could faint and maybe die. So I'm going to, again, wait until the morning when both of us are fresh and I can ease into the conversation about how lucky we are. So this time he buried that sack in the bucket of ashes that was inside the shed, and he went in for his supper, and they went to sleep. Well, he woke up in the morning with that same dream in his head, but found it too was real. The smell of cooking food and baking bread came from the kitchen. Old woman, how is it that again we have a feast? Old man, once more you didn't bring anything home, so I was able to sell the ashes in the bucket in the shed to the farm wife down the road who's making candles today. Well, again, he ducked his head, not wanting her to see the expression on his face. He had his breakfast. He went into the forest to collect his twigs and branches and spent the day doing so, thinking about the 2 previous days. Well, he came around that big rock, and you won't believe it, but the man was there again. That stranger, shaking his head, smiling ruefully, saying, giving you gold doesn't work. Take this bag of 22 frogs down to the market, find the fishmonger's roll, trade these frogs for the biggest fish you can find. And he handed the bag, with the movement happening inside it, to the old man. And the old man thanked him and started down to the village, thinking about what he was going to do, which was trade those frogs for a fish. And he found the fishmonger's aisle, and he found one that had a huge fish that he was able to bargain with and trade his frogs for that fish. Well, he carried it home, but it was too late to do any preparation for food, so he hung it on the usual hook that's above the door of his cottage and went in for his supper, and they went to sleep. Now, in the night, a huge storm came over that area, thunder and lightning and hail and rain. It was strong and intense. And then after it passed, the old couple finished their sleep. But at dawn, they were awakened by the sound of singing and of voices. And they went to their front door and opened it, and there were 3 young men laughing and giggling and dancing around. And one of them came to the old couple and said, "Thank you for saving our lives." Saving your lives? What are you talking about? Well, we're fishermen, and we were in our boat way out at sea, and that storm came up so suddenly we couldn't figure out where we were. We got all turned around. We didn't know where the shore was or how to get there. And then that light, that beacon, your beacon, came out and led us home. We could follow the light, and we could see where the land was, and we avoided the rocks at the harbor, and we were able to land safely. And as quickly as we could, we came up to thank you for saving our lives. Well, the old people said, "Beacon? What beacon?" But they all looked up, and there was that fish, shining so brightly that you could see it way out to sea. And so the young men had been able to come home safely. And from that day on, the old couple didn't want for companionship or for food, and all lived a happy life together. Now, that story is my adaptation of Italo Calvino's story, The Shining Fish. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And just goes to show shining lights are everywhere. So, Sarah, what kind of announcements would you like to give? I've put some things in the chat for people to take a look at.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Bowen. Well, Claire has already told you about the Bay Area Storytelling Festival. I'm sure you're all going to be there, and we'll be excited to see you back in Orinda this year. And then I want to just make a shout out to Liz Nichols, who's the SAC Regional Gem for 2026. And she will be telling stories as we honor her for her Regional Gem Award in April. It's in the chat, April 11th. It'll be at Stagebridge. It's open to everyone. We hope that you can come. Thank you.
Wonderful, Sarah. Thank you so much for your story and for all the wonderful work that you do for SAC and
Thank you.
so many other storytelling associations.
Thank you.
Oh, that was fabulous. Well, we have our last teller and our guest teller, who is Cooper Brown. He's with Stories with Spirit. And welcome to Storytelling Association of California, Cooper.
Thank you.
So when I asked Cooper what is his favorite hero from a legend, he gave us a literary legend. His hero is Reepicheep from the Chronicles of Narnia, who has been Cooper's guiding light since the age of 4. And with that shining light before us, Cooper is going to tell us the story Nisa, the Goblin, and the Grocer.
Thank you, Bowen. Thank you for the invite to be here. It's really lovely. And to all of the other tellers, it's really lovely to hear you. This is a Hans Christian Andersen story. And the funny part is I don't really like Hans Christian Andersen. I think he's really weird. But a couple of years ago, I was looking for stories for a solstice show that I do. And this came across my radar and I really fell in love with it. So I really should go back and read through the collection because I think there are some gems in it that I've missed. Once, long ago in Copenhagen, there lived a proper grocer. He was a round man that knew the price of salt and coffee. He kept a good shop, and with him was a proper grocer's wife. She was tall and thin, and she drove a hard bargain. She knew all the gossip in the neighborhood, but she was a kind woman that kept a good house, was kind to her servants. And above them, renting the garret apartment above the shop, was a proper student. A young man in a threadbare coat that every day walked to the university where he studied and at night would sit with a tallow candle continuing to read. And there was an afternoon when he returned from his studies that he knocked on the shop door. He was let in. They caught up on the local gossip, and he asked to buy some bread and cheese for his breakfast, for his dinner, and an extra candle. And he watched as the merchant tore a page from a leather-bound book, wrapping up the cheese in it, handing it to him. And on the page was verse. Old verse in Latin, good verse. Sir, where did you get that book? This morning an old woman couldn't pay for all of her coffee. She offered me the book, and, I figure it's good enough to wrap groceries in. Sir, that barrel by the fire that you store scraps of paper in to light the fire, it knows more about poetry than you do. This is good poetry. They all laughed, for it had been said in jest. I'd sell it to you. I said, a couple of pennies. But the young man had no more money. Could I ask you to take the cheese back? I'll just eat bread tonight, but I would rather to save the book. Well, the merchant, he tried to flatten out that one page that he'd wrapped the cheese with and put it there in the front of the book and handed it over to the young man. Now, I must tell you that in this house of a proper grocer, a proper grocer's wife, and a proper student, there also lived a proper Nisa. Now, Nisa, if you don't know the word, are a cousin to the kobolds of Germany and second cousins twice removed to the brownies of England. They're house fairies. They're little men. They stand no taller than my knee. They wear red wool caps they pull low over their eyes. They have long white beards. They often live behind the stove. And a house that is well cared for. The animals well cared for, the house well kept, honesty and goodness in that house. And Nisa will see that that house prospers. And the merchant, he dealt honestly with his customers. His wife kept a fine house. She was kind to her maid. Cats were always brushed. Sometimes they didn't always sweep behind the door, but the Nisa saw that it was done. And the flourishing of that shop had some of him in it. But the Nisa, he would have nothing to do with the student who lived above. For the student he would only empty the cinders out of his fire when they were overflowing. He had never swept behind the door, and what was happening under his bed just couldn't be spoken of. But The Nisa did not like to hear the merchant, a good man, a good housekeeper, be disparaged in his own shop. But the Nisa also had no idea what poetry was. So that night, as all the household has gone to sleep, he made his way up the stairs to the room wherein the merchant and his wife slept. And there, as Nisas can do, he climbed up onto the bed where the couple snored, and he reached into the mouth of the merchant's wife and pulled out her tongue. And with it, he walked his way back down the stairs, and he pressed it onto the barrel by the fire with the scraps of paper to light the fire. My Nisa, how are you tonight? I'm fine. Okay, so the student said that you know more about poetry than the merchant does, and he knows more about anything than any, but what's poetry? Oh, my Nisa, poetry is what they often print it on the back page of the newspaper. It's often in rhyme and quite silly. Nothing of importance. The Nisa took the tongue and he put it on the cash box and then the register and then the coffee grinder and then each of the logs of the fire. And they all agreed that the barrel it knew the most, as all those papers that went into it read each one of them. The Nisa put the tongue back on the barrel as it seemed to have the most to say, and it went up the back stairs to have a word with the student about poetry and propriety. That upper hallway was cold. The wind cut through the chinks in the wall, and the Nisa pulled his coat tight as he stood up on his toes to look in through the keyhole of the student's door. And there he saw the young man with a blanket wrapped over his shoulders, a candle on his table, and that leather-bound book opened before him. Now, Nisa can see what is really there. And from the pages of that book came a silvery light and golden tendrils that formed themselves into a tree that branched across the attic roof. And from the branches of that tree grew flowers of crystal in which he saw the faces of men and women, boys and girls, brown like earth, white like snow, red and black and gold. And they began to sing. And he stared. He stood there on his tiptoes, staring through the keyhole until the student closed the book, and the room seemed so much darker. As the student blew out his candle and curled up to go to sleep, the Nisa made his way back down to the shop, still hearing the music in his ears. There, the barrel was regaling all of the other implements concerning the trade embargo on lumber and what it was to do with the recent workings in the furniture industry. And then he pulled the tongue off and made his way back up the stairs, where he put it back in the woman's mouth. And he went back to sit behind the stove and think about things. Well, next morning, the merchant's wife did say she felt like she had a tongue wag all night long, and she was rather more quiet than normal all day. Days passed, and Nisa want for very little. They don't like it when they are acknowledged. Some house fairies like crumbs or bits to be left out for them, but Nisa, they only want a clean house, well cared for animals. But every year at Christmas, a house with a Nisa should pay its due. A bowl of porridge with a particularly thick pat of butter, and that year it was the best butter. There was nothing for it. The merchant and his wife, in comparison to the student who never swept his floor. But there was a night. There was a night in February, in the deep and dark and cold, that the cry of fire, fire, fire came echoing up the street. The merchant ran down in his nightdress. He opened the door to see a building not much farther up the street as flames began to lick out the windows. He ran there, filling his pockets with the contents of his cash box before putting on his jacket and trousers to rush out to help. His wife fetched her jewelry. She wrapped it in a scarf, and then she and the maid as well. The student ran down the stairs, and the Nisa, first seeing that the cats were safe, he went for the one thing in the house he truly loved. He stuffed it down into his red cap. He climbed up out of the window to stand on the slates of the roof looking down. He didn't really go out. He didn't know the Nisa of that house or the people there, but as he watched the flames lick out, he thought of his own house. But the neighborhood poured out. They broke the ice off the pump handle, and soon buckets were passed from hand to hand, and the fire beaten back. And when it was sure that that house was saved, Denisa opened the hat that he had clutched in his hands, and in it was a leather book, the first page torn out and stained with cheese. And he made his way back through the window. He put the book there where it had been on the student's table, and he went down to the kitchen to fetch a mop and a bucket and a broom. And as much as it pained his soul, he emptied the cinders from the fire. He swept underneath the bed, and he took a rag to that window that had never seen war. But in the days and weeks and months that followed, he became the Nisa of the whole house. For the merchant and his wife kept a good shop, and they kept him fed on butter and porridge. But the student had poetry, and together they fed the Nisa's soul.
Fantastic, Cooper. Thank you so much. Now I know the importance of keeping porridge and the best butter in my house.
You gotta give him porridge. I actually spent a lot of time looking up what Danish rice porridge is. It's apparently a Christmas staple. So
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Tell us about what's coming up for you.
If you're not familiar with my work, I host a show called Fairytale Variations, wherein we take a classic fairy tale and we play with them. This last show, we had Bill Lepp and Kim Whitecamp on the show. It was Megan Wells. It was just stunning. I get really amazing people who are like, give me a fairy tale, we'll play. Our next show is the third Saturday in April. I am hoping to get a mailing list out about it this week. If you're not on my mailing list, I'm going to throw it here in the chat. It's really the way that I communicate with people. Stories with Spirit is on Facebook if you want to hunt us up, but the mailing list is really the best way. And if you are this is mostly California. I also work for a show called Exposed, which is the complete opposite end of the spectrum, really intense, deep personal storytelling. And we're about to do shows in Chicago and Vancouver, British Columbia, and Salt Lake City. And so if you know tellers in those places that would be interested in playing in some really deep places, we're about to do a call for tellers. So that's what's in my world right now.
Fantastic, Cooper. Can't wait for your next fairy tale variations.
Our next one is dragons, by the way. That's
wonderful.
After.
Well, that is our show. Thank you very much, everyone, for calling, for coming. We're going to call the tellers back. I just wanted to slip in there that I will be doing next weekend the Sharing the Fire for the Northeast Storytelling. I'm going to be doing a fringe, sharing it with Jennifer Monroe, and of course the SAC, the Bay Area Storytelling Festival in April. So let's have all our tellers back. Thank you so much. It was a fabulous show. Thanks to all of the tellers for inspiring us. And we want to thank all of you for joining us. Anything that you want to say right now would be, go ahead. We've got a little time.
Thank you, Bowen. Thank you, Claire.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Good job, Bowen.
Thank you, Bowen.
Great evening.
Thank you for
Wonderful.
Claire stepping in to run the tech.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yes, Claire, that was amazing. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And as a reminder, the show has been recorded and will be posted on SAC'S YouTube channel. So you can still watch the show if you missed any of the stories or simply want to hear them again. And I do. They were fabulous. Donations in support of SAC can be made after the event through the Storytelling Association of California website. And if you are a storyteller interested in telling at an upcoming Genre Stories event, please contact your storytelling group. If your group would like to nominate a teller for any of the upcoming monthly events, please have your group's representative contact Ed Lewis at ed-lewis@sbcglobal.net. We'll put that into the chat for you. So thank you once again for a most wonderful night of fables, myths, story, fantasy, and fairy tales. I didn't get the order straight, MFFF. But thank you everyone for coming tonight. It's been a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bowen.
Bye.
You, Bowen. Excellent.
Great show.
MC.
Great show. Thank you.
Mm.